Alrighty, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to wait a couple more minutes to allow some more people to trickle in, and then we will get started. All right, just a couple more minutes while we're letting everyone else trickle in. All right, well, it is a couple after the hour, so we will go ahead and get started. Alrighty, well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today at the end of what's finally been a sunny day here in Madison, Wisconsin. I feel like we didn't have a very long or an intense winter this year, but it felt a lot longer than normal. So these sunny days have been very appreciated. My name is Lauren Cohen, and I am the program coordinator with Renew Wisconsin. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Renew, we are a renewable energy advocacy organization. So we work on policies, programs, and education that advance renewable energy in the state of Wisconsin. We work on things like solar power, wind power, electric vehicles, a little bit of local hydropower, some building electrification, and energy storage. Thanks again for joining us. And without further ado, let's get right into the webinar. Okay, so we're going to start off with a little bit of an agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. So first things first, we are going to look at an overview about how solar works. So how are we able to convert sunlight into energy that can power our homes? Next, we are going to cover the different reasons that someone may choose to have solar panels installed on their home and why solar energy might be considered slightly more advantageous to a more standard form of energy production. After that, we are going to go over some financing incentives that are available for residential solar installations. There have been some really new exciting incentives over the past year for residential solar, so we are definitely going to cover those. After that, we are going to go over process and next steps if you are interested in going forward with installing solar on your home. Then we are going to look at an example proposal from my co-host. We have Samantha Hauk here. Samantha is the Associate Head of Sales with Arch Solar. You can say hello, Samantha.
Hi, everyone.
Sam, please feel free to jump in and add anything at any point throughout this presentation, or please correct me if I say something that is not correct. And then at the very end, we're going to have a little bit of a time for a Q&A, but feel free to drop in any questions that you have in the chat throughout the presentation. You'll also notice there's a little Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to use that as well. Alrighty, so how exactly does solar work? I'm sure all of us are familiar with the basic idea behind solar. You know, sun rises in the morning, sunlight hits the panels, and the panels produce energy. But how exactly does this work? So the technology behind solar PV or solar photovoltaics has been around for a lot longer than I initially thought when I was first looking into it. So something called the photovoltaic effect, that was initially, which is the basis behind solar PV technology, that was initially discovered in the late 19th century. And the first solar panel was created over 100 years ago. And if you look at that first model, it's actually really similar to the design that we use today. And obviously there's been, technological advancements and they work much more efficiently, but they're very similar. So before I had a better understanding of how solar worked, when I would think about solar energy and solar panels, I imagined that these systems were really, really complex with a ton of equipment and a bunch of moving parts. But as you can see from my pictures that I have on this slide, there aren't a ton of individual components that make up a solar array. So if we start on the very left-hand side of the slide, we have something that I'm sure we all recognize. This is our solar panel. So modern solar panels, they're made of several different layers of materials, and they work together and they convert sunlight into electricity. So the layers include things like a frame, you have tempered glass, usually some form of an encapsulant. So that's typically silicone. But how do all these layered materials actually produce energy? So when sunlight hits the solar panels, the PV cells, which are those little individual squares that you can see on the left-hand side, these are going to absorb the energy and create an electric field. And this electric field then causes a flow of electrons, and that generates a direct current or a DC electrical charge, which we will cover a little bit more in the next slide. And while it sounds a little bit complex, the beauty of these panels is that they do this all on their own. So they need little to no maintenance. If the sun is shining and you have the panels on your roof and those panels are connected to the grid, they will be producing energy. So it's almost like a sort of set it and forget it kind of thing. All right, so moving on from left to right, this electricity then travels to an inverter, which then converts the direct current or DC energy into alternating current or AC energy that can be used in homes. So what's interesting about the kind of energy that your solar panel produces, the DC energy, that's not the kind of energy that can be utilized by the appliances in your home. So we need to be able to have these inverters that can be able to convert it to what's called alternating current, which is that current that our home appliances can use. I have two different kinds of inverters shown here. We have a standard inverter on the left, and then we have a microinverter on the right, so that little black square. Microinverters, they transform the power of individual solar panels into energy. So if you have a solar array on your roof and that array consists of 30 solar panels, you're going to have 30 individual microinverters underneath each solar panel. And the microinverters are great because they allow you to individually monitor the panels in your solar system. And the panels that Arch is offering this year, I believe they each use individual microinverters. And then on the very right, we have something that you'll probably recognize as well. So this is our meter. So this is something that is going to be tracking your electrical use, your electrical consumption. And this will be also tracking your electrical production from your solar array as well. All right, so to give a little bit of a visual representation of what we just discussed. So as you can see from this little GIF, we have the sunlight. The sunlight is hitting the solar panels. The electrons within those solar panels become excited, and then they produce that direct current DC electricity. And from there, they will travel down to the inverter, where that inverter will transform that energy into AC energy. In this little GIF, that is a separate inverter, but in the solar panel, if you were to go with Arch, there would be separate little inverters called a microinverter under the panels like we talked about that will convert that energy from DC to AC. And then that AC energy will be able to be used in your home with your appliances. If you take a look at the meter, you'll notice that the arrows are going to and from the grid. So they're bidirectional. And this means that electricity is flowing both ways, both from your home to the system both from your system to the grid and from the grid to your home. So this brings up the idea of something called net metering. So net metering, this is when you have a grid-tied solar array, and 99.9% of residential solar systems are grid-tied. So when I reference a solar array throughout this, we're going to be talking about grid-tied arrays. When you have a grid-tied array and your system is producing more electricity than is being consumed, rather than going into your home, the electricity you produce will go out onto the grid and power, let's say, like your neighbor's home. On the flip side of that, when your solar system may not be producing as much energy as is needed to fulfill your energy consumption, such as, during the nighttime or, during bad weather, which is no foreign concept to us here in Wisconsin, you are able to pull electricity in from the grid. So with net metering, any excess electricity that a solar system generates and is not used is sent back to the grid and it is credited to the homeowner's account. And how exactly you would be credited in net metering depends on your specific utility, but that's generally the idea of how that goes. And net metering is really, really great because it allows you to only pay for the net amount of electricity that you consume. All right, and here's just another visual of net metering. So right now we are looking at the real production from a solar array and a real single day of energy consumption and production. So if we're looking at this, the area in red, that represents the consumption. In other words, consumption from the utility, so the electricity that this homeowner is pulling from the grid. So you can see that's going to be in the morning and at night when the sun really isn't shining. The green is going to represent solar production. So that's the amount of electricity that their solar system is producing. And then if you take a look at the blue, that represents the homeowner's energy consumption from their own array. So something to pay attention here is the really large area in green that doesn't overlap with the blue. So in terms of net metering, this would be considered excess electricity that is going to be sent back to the grid and the homeowner is given a credit for. And if you were to average out that green to cover the whole 24-hour period, so kind of smush it all down, that kilowatt hour production is enough to offset the homeowner's entire day of electricity consumption. So that's why net metering is a really cool thing. All right, so now we have a little bit of an idea of how solar works. We are going to go over what we consider an optimal home for solar. So what do we consider to be a solar-ready home? So the first thing that we want to talk about are the various aspects of your roof. So when we talk about things like shading, an ideal home for solar would be one that has no shading from trees or any other buildings. Any shade that's going to be cast on your roof is going to be shade that's going to cut into the solar potential of your home. But this isn't to say that if you have some shade on your roof, you're immediately disqualified from solar, but ultimately the less shading, the better when it comes to your eligibility for a solar array. The second thing that we want to look at when assessing your home solar viability is the age of your roof. So ideally, when starting your solar journey, you're going to want to start with as new of a roof as possible. And this is because if you think about the idea that solar panels lifespans are around 30 years, you want your roof to be able to support those panels throughout their whole lifespan. And to give a little bit of a point of reference, if you're wondering, I don't know if I should replace my roof or not, if your roof is less than 10 years old, you're most likely in the clear. If your roof is 20 years or older, you're most likely going to want to replace that roof before installing solar. And if you're somewhere in that gray area between 10 and 20 years, that's sort of determined on a case-by-case basis. And that's a great question to bring up to your solar consultant when they're doing things like a site assessment. Alrighty, and in terms of a roof orientation, so a south-facing roof is considered optimal or ideal for solar, but it's by no means a requirement anymore. East-facing roofs nowadays are absolutely okay when installing a solar array. If your roof is north-facing, however, that may mean that your home is not ideal for solar, but there are other ways that we can look at to increase the energy efficiency of your home outside of installing solar panels. All right, so some final things that we want to consider is the energy efficiency of your home. So a solar-ready home should have measures taken that make it already at least somewhat energy efficient. So this is because you don't really want the energy production of your solar array to go toward home energy uses that are preventable. So taking some time to make sure that you're making those upgrades prior to installing your solar system, and that can help reduce the size and the cost of your system as a whole that you need to power your home. And so to tackle this idea before you get your solar system installed or before you schedule that site assessment, you can do a little bit of an energy audit. So taking a look at all of your electronics and your appliances and seeing if they're operating, efficiently or if any of them are in need of a replacement. Alrighty, so now that we've looked at a solar-ready home, we are going on to reasons to install solar. So there's lots of individual reasons to install solar, but we're going to go over just some general motivations right now. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the reliability of solar. So looking at a solar panel, I feel like it's really easy to underestimate its ability to hold its own in terms of lifespan and inclement weather or anything like that. But these panels are really great at doing what they're made to do. So most solar panels are under a 25-year warranty, but their lifespan will oftentimes outlive that warranty. So solar panels have less than a 1% degradation rate, meaning that at the end of your solar system's lifespan, it's still producing like around, depending if you're at 20 to 30 years, 70 to 80% of its original capacity. So, pretty close to its original capacity. All right, now looking at solar panels in terms of weather, a big misconception about solar panels is their ability to perform on days when it's not completely sunny. So in terms of production on these suboptimal days, days where it's overcast, days where it's stormy, systems can still produce energy. And while it might not be enough to offset your entire home's consumption for the day, they do still have that ability to produce electricity. Another thing when looking at things like weather, hail, wind, solar panels, they are made out of really, really durable materials, and they can withstand things like golf ball sized hail and 140-mile-per-hour winds. So they should be okay with those little hailstorms we've been getting, and even some of our Wisconsin winds that are with these homes situated near the lakes. I know it can get pretty windy on the isthmus. All right, one thing that is of note to talk about is the solar system's performance in the winter, particularly when it snows. So living in Wisconsin, I'm sure that's something that's on the forefront of all of y'all's mind. So when you think about a snowfall, especially in Wisconsin during the winter, where we get a big amount of snow and it's really cold out, that snow is going to stick on the ground. And a lot of the times that snow is going to stick there for a while. So in instances like this, the snow will tend to stick to the solar panels too. And if you do have snow covering your solar panels, that production of the solar panel will essentially stop. There is a slight upside to that though, which is that, due to the panels being a really dark color, that dark navy or black, the snow tends to melt a little bit earlier than it would on other surfaces. And oftentimes if your roof is at a pitch, so at an angle, that roof angle will help the snow slide off as well. Already, another great reason to install solar panels is that solar panels increase the value of your home. So solar powered homes typically sell faster and for more money than similar homes without solar power. There have been a bunch of studies that support this idea, including one done by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory done a few years back. And they found that your home value increases around $20 for every $1 saved on your utility bills. And the reason for that is exactly for those, that money saving reason. If you're looking to buy a new home and you're looking at two similar homes, similar size, similar features, built a similar year, but one has solar panels, most people will be drawn to that home that has the solar panels on the roof simply due to the lower utility bills. Right, the last thing I want to talk about in terms of different motivations that may push someone to install solar is that solar is really affordable. So as this graph shows, the cost to install solar energy has decreased by about 50% over the last decade. And the amount of solar that has been installed over the last 10 years has absolutely skyrocketed. And with this increase in homes installing solar, the cost has been able to significantly come down as well. You will notice that the price has slightly increased over the past couple of years, as has the cost of many other things, as I'm sure we're all very familiar with. But overall, there is a very significant downward trend in the cost of installing solar. All right, now taking a look at this slide. So this graph demonstrates the difference between the hard and soft costs of solar. So when I say soft costs, I'm talking about anything that doesn't go directly into the solar system. So things like labor, customer acquisition, permitting, interconnection. So soft costs are actually going to be the bulk of the cost when it comes to installing a solar system. Things like hard costs, so the panels themselves, the inverters, the equipment, that's actually going to make up a smaller proportion of that cost as a whole. So you may see on this little graph that hardware costs have gone up slightly as well, but they've remained fairly stable in the last few years. But all this is to say that while solar is absolutely not inexpensive by any means, over recent years, the costs to install solar have absolutely dramatically dropped. And when you think about all the different financial incentives that are currently available to homeowners, it's really a great time to install solar. Okay, so that brings us into our next topic, which is economics and incentives. So in this section, we're going to talk a little bit about the different rebates and incentives that are available to homeowners, as well as get into those nitty-gritty details about how much these systems tend to cost. So the first financial incentive that I want to talk about is from Focus on Energy. So for those of you who may have not have heard of it, Focus on Energy is a program that has a goal of installing cost-effective energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. And one of the ways that they do that is through a residential rebate. So Focus on Energy offers any homeowner within participating utilities areas a $500 flat rebate to homeowners installing solar. There are certain qualifications that need to be met in order to be eligible for this $500 rebate. And those qualifications are the system needs to be installed within 135 degrees of due south. So that's basically saying anything but north. The roof tilt must be between 5 degrees and 50 degrees. And the roof can't be more than 15% shaded. So 85% of your roof needs to be free from shade. There's also going to be a $500 adder for homes. Those are typically homes in the more rural zip codes, but all this energy is going to be, or all this information is going to be on the Focus on Energy website. And so if you are curious if your home is in that zip code, they have all of the eligible zip codes on there as well. All right, another super exciting thing that I want to talk about is something called the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm sure we've all heard of it, but the Inflation Reduction Act is arguably one of the most positive and instrumental pieces of renewable energy legislation in history. And with it, there's a really, really great incentive for residential solar installations. So this incentive is called a solar investment tax credit. So this is a credit of 30% of the cost of your system. So what's great about this tax credit is that it can be carried over year to year. So if your tax appetite may not be big enough in one year, the year that you install solar, you can carry it over into the following year, basically until that 30% is, eaten up. All right, so now that we've gone over the available rebates and incentives to residential solar installations, I wanted to go over a little bit of a hypothetical scenario of what a solar system may cost. So it's important to remember with this little demonstration that this is not going to look exactly like the proposal you receive. Each system is going to be very specifically tailored to your own home, to your own energy usage, and there's tons of different factors that go into it. But I just wanted to be able to give, a bit of a rough idea about what to expect and just how much these rebates and incentives help shave off that upfront cost of installing a solar system. So for this demonstration, I am going to be using a 6 kilowatt residential solar system. So the upfront cost of that is going to be somewhere around $18,000. It could be more, it could be less, but we're just using $18,000 as a ballpark. So if you add in that Focus on Energy rebate, we have that is going to take off $500. Then we have the tax credit, and that is going to take off $5,400. And that leaves an out-of-pocket cost of $12,000 or $12,100. So again, this is completely hypothetical, just a rough idea of the price to install a solar system. Now, even though these tax credits and rebates, they shave off a pretty significant portion of the cost of installing a solar system, that final figure of $1,200 is by no means inexpensive. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a few solar financing options that MadiSUN offers and that we partner with. Okay, so the first organization that I wanted to talk about briefly is called Green Penny. So Green Penny is a virtual bank, and it offers renewable energy project financing. So this program will offer 100% of your solar system, or will finance 100% of your solar system with no money down. You have a fixed interest rate throughout that whole time that it takes to pay it off. We also partner with another place called Clean Energy Credit Union. And this is a nonprofit that's committed to helping individuals afford clean energy through financing options. So a fairly similar financing option to Green Penny. Clean Energy Credit Union is going to offer combined loans for up to $90,000, and they also have fixed interest rates. So if either of these financing options are interesting to you or intriguing, and if you want to know more, please feel free to email me or give me a call after this presentation. I'd be happy to dig a little bit more into the details about this. But these are some really great different options for financing your solar installation. All right, moving on, we are going to talk about payback periods. So calculating returns on investment for a solar system is surprisingly easier than you would think, given the monitoring systems that are available for these systems, for your solar systems nowadays. So with these monitoring systems, oftentimes you can have like an app on your phone where you can individually monitor the production of each of your solar panels, which is really neat. And you can see the amount of energy that each is producing, like to the decimal point. So if we look at two common utilities here in Madison, we have MG&E and Alliant. With MG&E, you're paying a little bit over 16 cents per kilowatt hour of energy you consume. And with Alliant, that number is around 13 cents. And if you have one of like a municipal utility, that number is going to be a little bit different, but these are two of the main ones. All right, so going back to the hypothetical situation earlier of that 6 kilowatt array, with that system, you would be having annual energy savings of around $1,000 to $1,200, depending on your utility. Okay, so we use these utility rates to calculate your return on investment. So if we do a little bit of a calculation based off of the size of our array, its annual kilowatt hour production, and the rate of your utility, we are able to figure out your return on investment. So talking about that 6 kilowatt array example, if we were to average about $1,200 in savings per year from that MG&E value, it's going to take around 10 years for us to pay off the cost of our system. And this number, again, is going to be dependent on a lot of different factors, including your individual electricity usage, which is going to vary from person to person very vastly, and things like weather. But I'd say anywhere from like a 10 to 12 payback period is a good estimate. If you have a municipal utility where that buyback rate is going to be a little bit lower, it can go up to like 15 years, but anywhere around that, you're still going to have 10 to 15 years after that return on investment where you are producing your own energy and getting those credits, which is really great. Alrighty, so next we are going to talk a little bit about extras. So with Arch Solar, they are offering the options of things like electric vehicle charging and battery storage. So as we're seeing more technological advancements, we're seeing different fun things like this that we're able to incorporate into our solar systems. So if you choose to include these, this is obviously going to impact the cost of your system. The battery storage is definitely going to impact the cost more than the EV charging. But if you're looking at something like an EV charger, this may impact also like the size of your system, and you may need a slightly larger system. And then the battery storage is going to be a whole nother beast, but I'm going to let Sam talk a little bit about these add-ons for a minute.
All right. Well, yeah, so Lauren's spot on. In general, I guess I'm speaking for Arch Solar only. For EV chargers specifically, we do install them all the time. We do only install them as part of larger projects though, like solar and or battery. Otherwise, just for your knowledge, like if you're ever looking for just an EV charger installation, most anyways, reputable, local electricians should be able to help you out with that. So certainly we would be happy to do it as part of a larger project. But just so you know, you can have that installed kind of anytime. Battery storage, as Lauren mentioned, it is a technology that is still rather expensive. I'm very transparent that like all of the batteries that we offer at Arch Solar currently are in the ballpark of about $20,000, which is often about the same as the cost of your system. So again, definitely want to be transparent about that and make sure that your expectations are in line with, the current reality. obviously, we are hopeful that over the next couple of years, technology will continue to develop, maybe additional incentives will come into play, and we really hope that those costs can come down. But yeah, so for right now, batteries are expensive and they don't offer that same clear-cut, payback that the solar system itself offers, but they do definitely offer additional functionality and ultimately peace of mind, just that backup power, energy storage ability in the event that the grid goes down. You can still power either your whole home or certain loads that you identify ahead of time using that backup battery power. And another thing that I didn't know until I started working in the industry is that in a grid-tied solar system, which is what we're talking about here, the only way to allow your solar system to continue functioning during a grid outage is with a battery storage component. Basically, the microinverters that we use, that we were talking about, that are on the back of the panels, you can say that they sense when the grid is down, and as a safety feature, they will stop production in that case, because obviously we don't want power flowing through the lines when we've got technicians working on them to try to restore the grid. So in the event of a grid outage, even on a nice, hot, sunny summer day, if you don't have battery storage, your solar system will not produce while the grid is down, unless you have a battery to act as like a secondary grid, essentially, to tell those microinverters, hey, it's okay to keep producing. Any excess energy produced can go here to the battery. So yeah, that's just sort of, I think, some important basics to know about batteries and EV chargers, and I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability later on.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sam. Yeah, there's a lot of different factors that go into EV and especially battery storage, but it's always good to have that information under your belt so you can see if you want to pursue that. Alrighty, so now we're going to talk about the different benefits of joining a group buy. So one of the biggest advantages of joining a group buy is that we make the process really, really simple. So a lot of the times when you decide you want to put solar panels on your house, it can be a little bit of an overwhelming process. You don't really know where to start. There's tons of different installers in the area. We sort of take care of all that. So we put you in contact with pre-vetted, reputable installers, and these installers have proven track records like Arch Solar, who are really intimately familiar with the residential solar process. Another great thing about a group buy is that it uses the collective buying power of homeowners to get a slight price break in the cost of installing solar as well. So this is going to be a little bit less expensive than you would if you were to individually go to an individual contractor, get a site assessment, and get an individual proposal. So with Arch, we're offering a little bit around a 5 or 6% discount than you would normally see if you were to be going to one alone. Lastly, something that MadiSUN offers that you wouldn't get if you were to go to installer on your own is that additional little layer of customer service. So if there's anything that you have any questions about, you can always talk to us. So if you have any questions, you can always feel free to email me. You can email Sam. You can email Stanley, who's also with Arch, but is not on this call today. And we'd always be happy to talk about any questions you have about the solar process or just energy efficiency in general. So just to summarize all of that, MadiSUN and just group buys as a whole, they just really simplify the process of going solar for the homeowner. All right, so with MadiSUN has been operating since 2016. We are a City of Madison program, and we have helped 289 homeowners go solar so far. And so that's been an aggregate capacity of around 1,600 kilowatts, which is pretty neat. So after all of this, you've thought that, solar could be interesting, and it's something that you might want to go through with. So we'll go over a little bit of a process and the next steps. So the first step, I'm sure a lot of you have already taken this first step, but just in case you haven't, we have something called an I'm interested form. That's going to be on the MadiSUN website. So MadiSUNSolar.com. It's going to be on the top right corner, and it just has you fill out some information about you, some background on your home. So things like how old your roof is, just some general information like that. So we can get a little bit of idea, a very broad idea about your home solar eligibility. After you fill out that form, you should be expecting a phone call from a consultant with Arch Solar, and they'll talk to you a little bit about their process and all of that, and they will schedule a free site assessment with you. So at the site assessment, it can either be virtual or it can be in person. And with this site assessment, they will assess your roof, your electrical panel, your solar potential, things like that, and see if you are a good candidate for solar. After that site assessment, and they find that you are indeed a good candidate, you will get your proposal, and your proposal will include things like the specific size of the array that they're suggesting, the type of the array, the layout of the array, and then they'll also do some really in-depth cost rebate analysis so you can see what kind of return on investment to expect with your home. And if all of that looks good, the contract will be issued, the contract will be signed, and that solar array will be installed. So since we've gone over that process and next steps, to give a little bit more of an in-depth idea, we're going to have Sam present an example proposal that you can expect from Arch, or just any solar installer in general. Will give you a little bit of idea of what to expect. So let's make sure that you are able to share your screen. Sometimes it gives a little. Perfect.
Okay, so you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Oh, and it already scrolled to page 2. Okay, so I'm going to quickly walk through an example proposal. Although actually, before I do, just to kind of reiterate the process that Lauren just walked you through, and I'm speaking from quite a lot of personal experience. I just started with Arch Solar last year, and was very excited to participate in the MadiSUN group buy last year as well. At that point in time, I was what's called a solar project facilitator, which is our kind of like an entry-level position. It's a great way to learn a lot about solar really quickly. And so that's actually who is going to be that first phone call and site assessment for you. So one of our solar project facilitators will be the first person to talk to you to kind of go through those basic questions and answer any questions you have. And that's usually done virtually. But if you're ready to go and very eager to kind of keep the process moving, we might just skip straight to the in-person site assessment as well. In any case, we will gather all the information we need. We'll create a little 3D model of your home in our design software, which I will just go ahead and give you. So this is a sample home, sample proposal, but you can see it's, we use, it's a 3D model. We model the trees. We do everything we can to make it as accurate as possible. And that's why we often do both a virtual and an in-person visit or conversation, just to make sure that absolutely everything in our model, to the best of our abilities, matches up to reality. So anyway, then after that initial visit or consultation and design, then at that point, the solar project facilitator would hand you off to one of our colleagues. They're called the energy consultants, and they're the people who actually take our initial design and put it all together in this beautiful proposal that we're about to walk through. So this is an example of a 6.56 kilowatt array, so very close to kind of the sample one that we were talking about earlier. And I think the numbers are pretty much in line with what Lauren was talking about earlier. So we've got a nice photo of a system we installed a couple of years ago here in Madison. And the MadiSUN logo. Okay, oops. So in our proposals, we include as much information as we can to make it as clear as possible to you, what you're getting and how it all works, and hopefully allows you to do an apples to apples, or as close as possible apples to apples comparison to any other quotes that you get. Obviously, Arch Solar is thrilled to have been selected as the only kind of preferred contractor through the MadiSUN program for 2023. It's an honor, and we're very excited. That being said, you should still get other quotes. Like, it is important to, just to educate yourself, to see how different companies do things. You just never know what you're going to learn, and we can learn a lot by that healthy competition. So Certainly, obviously we are thrilled again to hopefully be kind of a first choice, or certainly on the short list, but definitely do get other proposals to compare to. But in ours, something that I really like is that we really break down these costs pretty clearly. So the total upfront cost, not out of pocket cost, minus that focus on energy rebate that Lauren was talking about earlier, minus the tax credit. And then it's already, this 20,000 includes the group buy discount, which, as Lauren said, about 5 or 6% in most cases. So that again, that out of pocket upfront cost is about $13,000 for this system size. You can then see, a 6.56 kilowatt array is actually going to produce about 8,600 kilowatt hours in year one. And then it shows the lifetime savings as well over those 25 years. We got an estimate of what your monthly payment would be if you went through Green Penny or Clean Energy Credit Union, or one of those lending partners that we talked about earlier. Goes through our system components. So typically we use solar panels manufactured by a company called REC or REC, depending on who you ask. They are, I believe, Norwegian owned, manufactured in Singapore. We consider them the most premium panel available to us. They have an industry-leading degradation rate. So I think way back earlier in the presentation, we talked about like a 1% degradation rate for solar. Actually, in general, most solar panels have a degradation rate. The industry average is about 0.5%, and REC panels are 0.25%. So they're really, really kind of top of the line and will maintain their efficiency and productivity over the lifespan of the system, even better than most other solar panels out there. So that's why we use them in most of our systems, but we do also offer a SILFAB solar panel as well, and those are assembled in North America and are a little bit less expensive, but they are closer to that industry standard 0.5% degradation rate. So again, REC panels are here. We also use N-phase microinverters, and that's again in a 1-to-1 ratio. So each solar panel gets its own microinverter, which really we choose to do that because that way, if anything ever goes wrong with either the panel or the microinverter, only that panel and that microinverter will be impacted, and the rest of your system can continue operating and functioning as normal until we can get somebody out there to fix whatever's going on. So again, this is the 3D model of the home in question. You can see a nice symmetric array there on the south-facing back of the roof. So then on the next page, we kind of get into more details about the production and a little bit about the consumption as well. So, again, you can see that the production is in more or less a bell curve throughout, through the year, the summer being the highest production time, and then consumption more or less steady throughout the year, which makes sense. We're using about the same amount of electricity all year, maybe a little more in the summer if you have central air conditioning or something like that. So again, we just kind of go through a little bit more detail about your production versus your consumption, and again, kind of showing that your savings. This one is for an MG&E customer, but this would populate with Alliant or whoever your utility might be. Then on the next page is when we really get into more details about that payback period. So as Lauren mentioned, a 10-year payback period is pretty darn good here in Wisconsin. 12, 13 is also pretty good and would represent a solid solar system and payback period. This one's really good at 8.6 years. But so you can see that like the upfront cost of that $20,000 without the tax credit and everything kind of slowly whittles away until about year 9 right here, at which point all of this is free electricity, which is pretty cool. And then we also show it broken down if you choose to go through Green Penny or one of the other lending partners, you can see that payback period there. I'm going to call this out here and then again later, but we also try to be really transparent about the assumptions that we're using in all of our models, both the physical model, like the 3D model of your house, and our financial models. So for example, we are assuming a utility rate increase of 2.5% each year. That's relatively conservative in the industry, and we like it that way. We would rather kind of under promise and over deliver in that sense. Because there is a chance that utility rates will increase more like 3% or 4% or 5% even into the future. We just don't know that, and so we would rather kind of take a slightly more conservative approach. Then we just kind of get into some of our origin stories, some of our partners, including Renew Wisconsin, who's behind MadiSUN here, and kind of also talk about some of the other less financial or but otherwise tangible benefits of going solar. And then this is what I was referring to just a second ago, this assumptions and key information and the transparency that we like to have with regard to that. So again, the project lifespan is 25 years. That's the manufacturer's warranty on both the solar panels and the microinverters that we use. On top of that, Arch Solar offers a 5-year workmanship warranty. So that covers all of the labor that we do. So anything related to the work that we did, we would obviously come back and fix within 5 years. Snow loss is another one that we kind of touched on earlier. So again, obviously we live in Wisconsin, we get snow in the winter. That is going to impact your solar production. There's going to be a chunk of time, maybe a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, where your panels are just covered in snow. And rather than instructing or advising you to climb up on your roof and brush them off and potentially, put yourself in danger, you also could potentially scratch or damage the panels in the process, which would then void that wonderful 25-year manufacturer's warranty. So we definitely don't want to do that. So instead, we use a pretty aggressive snow loss estimate in all of our financial models. Again, just trying to take a somewhat, conservative approach in modeling your production and savings. I already touched on the 0.25% degradation rate of those REC module. Module is another word for solar panel. We use a 0% discount rate for the future value of money. This particular system ends up costing about $3.09 a watt. That could vary, from the low threes to the high threes, depending on all the specifics of your system. And that would also, get a little out of whack if you did include battery storage and things like that. But yeah, cost per watt of about $3.09. There's that 2.5% utility escalation rate that I just mentioned a minute ago. And then again, this is how much we're estimating you're going to be consuming. And that's informing your system size. Proposals are valid for 21 days. So if, and it happens all the time. And as I mentioned, you should be getting multiple quotes. So if you get a quote from us and then it takes a little bit of time to get the other quotes that you're comparing to, and it's been more than 21 days, if it's been like 30 days, it's probably okay. But if it's been a lot more than 21 days, just circle back to us and we might need to refresh your pricing a little bit. But yeah, that's just good to know for preparing for your proposal. Then our default proposal template just includes a little bit of more information about the batteries that we offer. That way, again, you can just sort of learn a little bit more and decide if it's something that you're interested in pursuing now, later, or not at all. And that's the end of the proposal. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sam. That was very helpful to be able to look over it. I feel that's very nice to kind of see what you can expect if you were, to go with Arch or anyone else, what to see or what you can expect when you're getting those proposals. And if you are really curious right now about, your home's energy potential, a website that's really helpful is something called projectsunroof.com. So this is a fun little website where you can plop in your address and it shows sort of like a satellite view of your home from above, and it'll show almost like a thermal pattern on your roof, anywhere from like purple to yellow meaning your roof gets a lot of sunlight, purple meaning your roof is kind of shaded. So that's kind of a good idea to assess if your home on your own is eligible for solar, One thing I will say about it is it's a little bit dated. So, if you've had some old growth trees and you've removed them within the last year or two, it might not reflect that. So that is something to keep in mind. I'm going to share my screen one more time so we can just see the contact information. But with all of that, that is the end of everything I have to share with you in terms of the webinar. So now if there are any questions, please feel free to either pop them in the chat or put them in the Q&A function, and we would be happy to answer them. We still have around 10 minutes left. And I'm having a hard time accessing that top toolbar, Sam. So if you see something, oh, there it is, pops up. Okay. And again, if you can't think of any questions right now, but you come across something later, please feel free to email me. You can email Sam, you can email Stanley, or give me a phone call. I didn't include my phone number on there. I probably should have. Something to do next time, but you can absolutely reach me by my email, and I'd be happy to respond to those questions for you. Give it another minute or two. All right, well, if there are no questions, thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time away from the sunny evening. Maybe you could have been listening to the webinar outside. Hopefully you were, but thank you so much for taking the time and spending the hour with us to learn a little bit more about residential solar in Madison. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, but otherwise have a great rest of your evening. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Bye.
Of course, I can't end it. There we go.